There is an unalterable law governing everything and every being.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise
I
up.
want there to be peace everywhere.
South Africa, I greet you all in the name of peace.
One more time, good evening. Wonderful, thank you. It's a little chilly night outside, but it is definitely warm up in here, so we're excited to have you. My name's Ken Crispin. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Multicultural Affairs here at IPFW, also the Interim Director of Admissions, and I get the wonderful opportunity to greet you this evening and give a brief introduction. I want to thank the Chancellor's Council on Diversity for its leadership and its funding of this great opportunity. I want to give a big shout out to Dr. Janet Badia and our Women's Studies. Come on, give her a hand for her partnership. And I want to send some love to our immediate past resource coordinator, who is none other than Kaylin Smith, who has brought a group of students from the University of Michigan at Dearborn. Come on, one more time, you've been Dearborn. And I also want to give a shout out to what I told Dr. Gay is our representatives of the oldest church established by African Americans in this community, none other than Turner Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church, 166 years strong. Come on, Turner Chapel, and say hello tonight. And a lot of times when we introduce people, we take a long time when we really read a lot of stuff. I want to do something a little differently and give you a taste of a voice. I recognize that I'm human, and the older I get, the more I realize how fallible I am, how fallible we all are. I've never dreamed of being a princess. I have not longed for Prince Charming. I have and do long for something resembling a happy ever after. I am supposed to be above such flights of fantasy, but I am not. I am enamored of fairy tales. Feminism is just an idea. It's philosophy. It's about the equality of women in all realms. It's not about man-hating. It's not about being humorless. We have to let go of these misconceptions that have plagued feminism for over 40, 50 years. I am failing as a woman. I am failing as a feminist. To freely accept the feminist label would not be fair to good feminists. If I am indeed a feminist, I am a rather bad one. I am a mess of contradictions. The last one says, that's what is always fascinating about racism, how it is allowed, if not encouraged, to flourish freely in public spaces the way racism and bigotry are so often unquestioned. My friends, this evening, Dr. Roxane Gay is the voice of a generation. Traveling in the current cold western winds, Dr. Roxane Gay commenced this journey by braving the snowy highways and the cold Midwestern ground to speak to you tonight. An associate professor of English at Purdue University, she teaches creative writing, fiction, creative nonfiction at the graduate and undergraduate level. Her first book was published by Artistically Declined Press in 2011, and in 2014, she published 2 books, An Untamed State from Grove Atlantic and Bad Feminist. Her next book, Hunger, will be released this year. Her writing has appeared in McSweeney's, the New York Times, Time, Virginia Quarterly Review, the Los Angeles Times, The Nation, the Rumpus Book Forum, Slate, Salon, Best American. It goes on and on and on. She is the voice of a generation. She received her PhD in 2013 from Michigan Technological University in Rhetoric and Technical Communication. She holds an MA in English with an emphasis in creative writing from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. Her research interests include intersections between race, gender, and popular culture, contemporary fiction, and a political novel. Here are my words to describe this wonderful scholar and great woman. Provocative, witty, honest, intelligent, honorable, teacher, educator, human developer, and transformational figure and leader. Shy, yet connected to the essence of the inner soulful peace that allows her to write artifacts that will live for generations to come. I present to you this voice of a generation, Dr. Roxane Gay. Won't you give her a hand?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. There's some water here too, and I'll put it up.
Is this thing on? All right, perfect. So I'm glad to see that although it's cold here, the weather isn't too bad. So thank you very much for that really flattering introduction. Wow, I don't do half of that stuff, but we can pretend. So I live in the middle of nowhere, and I have for several years. And so I have a lot of fantasies about my UPS man. And so I thought I'd share them with you. I love him. Let's just start there. I have a very special, very intense, very secret, very unrequited and ongoing relationship with the very attractive UPS man who brings me packages nearly every day. I love UPS man most during the spring and the summer when he wears brown polyester shorts and he speeds up the hill toward my building, music blaring, often classic rock. When he steps out, his thigh muscles flex, and I think, what can brown do for you? I have many answers to that question, and most of those answers involve horizontal surfaces. I love UPS man during the winter, too, when he wears his brown slacks, and they always look neatly pressed, and he doesn't wear a winter coat because he doesn't need any protection from the elements, because he's an active, hot-blooded man. He has nice boots, too. They leave footprints in the walkway, and when he's gone, I put my feet in his footprints, and it's like we're connecting in a very special way. To be fair, I do receive a fair number of packages, mostly books, on a daily basis. I also live on the second floor. I'm not easy to love. Sometimes I think this affects my relationship with UPS man, but I have to believe that we're going to make it through the fire. On a good day, UPS man drops off my packages and pounds on the door or rings the bell to let me know that a bounty awaits. His loud knock often startles me, but I'm pretty sure the force of his knock is his way of letting me know that he loves me too. I run to the door, and then I watch through the glass as he mounts his mighty brown steed, his truck, and drives away until the next time. Parting is such sweet, sweet sorrow. If I'm feeling cute, I open the door, probably not wearing a bra, as UPS man lingers in the driveway. I lean down to get my packages and grin at him. I do this to let him know all of this could be yours. There are times when UPS man doesn't knock or ring the bell, so when I open the front door, there are surprises waiting. This is so charming. It's like UPS man wanted to brighten my day with a lovely surprise, and instead of flowers, he offers polyurethane envelopes and cardboard boxes, and that's nearly as romantic as flowers. Sometimes, UPS man is in a hurry, and he basically launches packages at my front door as he runs by. This is exciting because I never know how the packages are going to land. I study the patterns like tea leaves, trying to discern the future and the past through this passive aggression. When he does this, I wonder what he's like when he has angry sex. I bet he's really good at that. Once in a while, UPS man is out sick or taking a vacation day or cheating on me. Look, I don't know. There are so many possibilities. The substitute is nothing like UPS man. He or she often won't leave my packages the way UPS man does. Instead, they leave that impersonal sticker letting me know that they'll be back at a later date. The only consolation I take from this is the possibility that it might be UPS man bringing my packages to their rightful place. I have loved him for years now. I will love him forever. Thank you. He really is delightful, though. He just has these perfectly formed calf muscles, and you know when you're driving by the UPS truck and they have the door open in the spring and the summer and all you see are those calf muscles? I'm here for it. So last year was a pretty good year, or I guess 2 years ago now. I published 2 books. And the first book I published was a novel called An Untamed State. My parents are from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and when I was growing up, they would take us to Port-au-Prince in the summer, and we would see amazing things, and we would go to the beach and the mountains, and my dad would climb palm trees, and he's a really straight-laced engineer, and so it was always amazing to just see this complete stranger in his homeland. The older I got, the more I began to realize that there was perhaps another side to paradise. And I really struggled with the privileges that my family enjoyed while so many people around us suffered. And so I wrote a novel about a young woman who's visiting her parents in Port-au-Prince when she's kidnapped and held for 13 days because her father is reluctant to pay the ransom. He worries that if you pay one kidnapper, they're going to come for the rest of the family, and soon he'll lose his entire fortune. And so the novel looks at what Mireille goes through during the kidnapping and how she tries to overcome her father's betrayal in the aftermath. And so this is the first chapter of An Untamed State. Once upon a time, in a far-off land, I was kidnapped by a gang of fearless yet terrified young men with so much impossible hope beating inside their bodies. It burned their very skin and strengthened their will right through their bones. They held me captive for 13 days. They wanted to break me. It was not personal. I was not broken. This is what I tell myself. It was hot, nearly 100 degrees, the air so thick it felt like warm rain. I dressed my son, Christophe, in a pair of miniature red board shorts and a light blue t-shirt with a sailboat across the front. I covered his smooth brown arms and his beaming face with sunscreen. I kissed his nose and brushed his dirty blonde curls away from his face as he pressed his palms against my cheek and shouted, "Mama, Mama, Mama." My husband, Michael, and I said goodbye to my parents and told them that we would be back in time for dinner. Michael and I were taking Christophe to the ocean for the first time. We were going to hold him in the warm salt water as he wiggled his toes and kicked his chubby legs. We were going to throw him toward the sun and catch him safely in our arms. My mother smiled from the balcony where she watered her plants, wearing a crisp linen outfit and high heels. She blew a kiss to her grandson. She reminded us to be safe. We put our son in his car seat. We handed him his favorite stuffed animal, a little bulldog named Baba. He clenched his beloved toy tightly in a little fist, still smiling. He has his father's temperament. He is usually happy, and that is important to me. Before getting into the car, Michael double-checked that Christophe was strapped securely. He put our bags in the trunk. Michael held my door open, and when he closed it, he pressed his face against the window and blew air until his cheeks filled. I laughed and pressed my hand against his face through the glass. "I love you," I mouthed. I don't say those words often, but he knows. Michael ran around to his side of the car. After he slid behind the steering wheel and adjusted the mirror so he could see the baby, he leaned into me and we kissed. He rested an arm between us, and I idly brushed the wisps of hair. I smiled and rested my head on his shoulder. We drove down the long, steep hill of my parents' driveway and waited quietly for the heavy steel gates, the gates keeping us safe, to open. In the back seat, Christophe cooed softly, still smiling. As the gates closed behind us, 3 black Land Cruisers surrounded our car, the air filled with a high-pitched squealing and the smell of burning rubber. Michael's tan knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel and looked frantically for a way out. His body shook. The doors of all 3 trucks opened at the same time, and men we did not know spilled out, all limbs and gunmetal. There was silence, the air thin, still hot. My breath caught painfully in my ribcage. There was shouting. 2 men stood behind our car, machine guns raised. Michael pressed his foot against the gas pedal to move forward, but a tall man with a red bandana across the lower half of his face, a man holding a machine gun, pounded his fist on the hood of the car. He left a small dent in the shape of his closed hand. He glared at us, then raised his gun, pointed it directly at my husband's chest. I threw my arm across Michael's body. It was a silly, impotent gesture. His eyes were bright, and arcs of tears trembled along his lower eyelids. He grabbed my hand between both of his, held me so fiercely it felt like all those slender bones would be crushed. Two men slammed the butts of their rifles against the car windows. Their bodies glowed with anger. The glass cracked, fractures spreading. Michael and I pulled apart, waited tensely, and then the windshield broke, the sound loud and echoing. We covered our faces as shards of glass shattered around us, refracting sharp prisms of light. We reached for the baby at the same time. The baby was still smiling, but his lips quivered, his eyes wide. My hands could not quite reach him. My child was so close, my fingers thrummed. If I touched my child, we would all be fine. This terrible thing would not happen. A man reached into the window and unlocked my door. He started to pull me out of the car, roughly growling as my seatbelt held me inside. He slapped me, ordered me to unlock my seatbelt. My hands shook as I depressed the button. I was lifted up and out of the car and thrown onto the street. The skin covering my face stung. My body deflated. My body was just skin stretched too tightly over bone, nothing more, no air. The man sneered at me, called me diaspora with the resentment those Haitians who cannot leave hold for those of us who can. His skin was slick. I couldn't hold on. I tried to scratch, but my fingers only collected a thick layer of sweat. I tried to grab onto the car door. He slammed his gun against my fingers. My baby, I yelled. Don't hurt my baby. One of the men grabbed me by my hair, threw me to the ground, kicked me. I gasped as I wrapped my arm around myself. A small crowd gathered. I begged them to help. They did not. They stood and watched me screaming and fighting with all the muscle in my heart. I saw their faces and the indifference in their eyes, the relief that it was not yet their time. The wolves had not yet come for them. Thank you. So after that, it doesn't really get better, I'm afraid to say. She goes through a lot of bad things, but in the end, I do think that it's a novel about hope and that you can overcome anything. So I also wrote another book called Bad Feminist. And the next time I write a book, I'm going to think about the title, because Bad Feminist is actually the title of one of the essays in the book. But it kind of took a life of its own. And now everywhere I go, people are like, oh, you're the bad feminist. And I say, oh, am I? Well, yes, I am. But still, it really did take on a life of its own. But I graduated with my PhD in 2010. And in my first year as an actual faculty member, I was completely bewildered by everything. And so I wrote an essay called Typical First Year Professor. I go to school for a very long time and get some degrees, and finally move to a very small town in the middle of a cornfield. I leave someone behind. I tell myself I have worked so hard I can't choose a man over a career. I want to choose the man over the career. Instead, I rent an apartment, the nicest place I've ever lived as an adult. I have a guest bathroom. I don't save lives, but I try not to ruin them. This is the dream, everyone says. A good job, tenure track. I have an office I don't have to share with 2 or 4 people. My name is on the engraved panel just outside my door, and my name is spelled correctly with 1 N. I have my own printer, and the luxury of this cannot be overstated. I randomly print out a document and sigh happily as the printer spits it out warm. I have a phone with an extension, and when people call the number, they're generally looking for me. There are lots of shelves, but I like my books at home. I actually read them. In every movie I've seen about professors, though, there are books. So I quickly unpack 3 boxes: trash I accumulated in graduate school, books I'll rarely open again, but I am a professor now. I must have books on display. It's an unspoken rule. The department's administrative assistant gives me the rundown on important things: mailbox, office supplies, photocopy code. I forget the code weekly. She is friendly, patient, and kind, but if you cross her, there will be trouble. I vow to never cross her. And then there is a mind-numbing orientation that begins with a student, of all things, playing acoustic guitar. A threatening sing-along vibe fills the room, and this student is not a talented singer. Most of the audience cringes visibly, and I hide in the very last row. For the next 2 days, I accumulate knowledge I will never use again. It's math all over. I'll be teaching 3 classes, 2 of which I've not quite taught before. It turns out when you say you can do something, people believe you. 10 minutes before my first class, I run to the bathroom and vomit. I'm afraid of public speaking, which makes teaching very complicated. When I walk into the classroom, the students stare at me like I'm in charge. They wait for me to say something. I stare back and wait for them to do something. It's a silent power struggle. Finally, I tell them to do things, and they do those things. I realize I am, in fact, in charge. Teaching 3 classes requires serious memorization when it comes to student names. The students tend to blur. It will take nearly 3 weeks for me to remember Ashley A and Ashley M and Matt and Mark and so on. And let me tell you, I have 4 nicks this semester in 1 class. I rely heavily on pointing. I color code the students. You in the green shirt. You in that orange hat. Then I get my first paycheck. We're paid once a month, which requires the kind of budgeting I am incapable of. Life is very unpleasant after the 23rd. I've been a graduate student for so long, it's hard to fathom that 1 check can have 4 numbers and then some change. Then I see how much demand takes, and I damn the man. Students do not know what to make of me. I wear jeans and Converse. I have tattoos up and down my arms. I'm tall. I am not petite. I am the child of immigrants. Many of my students have never had a black teacher before. I cannot help them with that. I'm the only black professor in my department. This will probably never change for the whole of my career, no matter where I teach. I'm used to it. I wish I weren't. There seems to be some unspoken rule about the number of academic spaces people of color can occupy at the same time. I get tired of being the only one. When I was a student, listening to a boring professor drone endlessly, I usually thought, I will never be that teacher. One day, I'm delivering a lecture and realize in that moment, oh God, I am that teacher. I stare out at my students, most of them not taking notes, all of them giving me that dead-eyed, soul-crushing stare that tells me I wish I were anywhere but here, and I think, I wish I were anywhere but here. I talk faster and faster to put us all out of our misery. I become incoherent. Their dead-eye stares haunt me for the rest of the day and then much longer. One day I'm walking down the hall. I hear a young woman saying, Dr. Gay, over and over, and I think that Dr. Gay is rather rude for ignoring that poor student. I turn around to say something before I realize, oh right, she's talking to me. I worry some of my students don't own any clothes with zippers or buttons or other methods of closure and fastening. I see a lot of words faded and stretched across asses, bra straps, pajama pants, often ill-fitting. In the winter, when there is snow and ice outside, boys come to class in basketball shorts and flip-flops. I worry about their feet and their poor little white toes. Helicopter parents email me for information about their children. How is my son doing? Is my daughter attending class? I encourage them to open lines of communication with their children. I politely tell them that there are laws, true story, preventing such communication without their child's written consent. The child never consents. Sometimes, during class, I catch my students staring at their cell phones beneath their desks like they're in a cone of invisibility. It's as funny as it is irritating. Sometimes I cannot help but say, I do see you, and other times I just take their phones. Sometimes, when students are doing group work, I sneak a look at my own phone like I am in a cone of invisibility. Clearly, I am part of the problem. And then, just past midterm, there is a plague on grandmothers. The elder relations of my students begin passing away at an alarming rate one week. I want to warn the surviving grandmothers somehow. I want them to live. The excuses students come up with for absences and homework amuse me in how ludicrous and improbable they are. They think I want to know. They think I somehow need their explanations. They think I don't know they're lying. Sometimes I simply say, I know you're lying, and you say it best when you say nothing at all. Thank you. Yeah, dead grandmother time is just around the corner. One semester, a student had 7 grandparents die, and I just thought, you have a very, very blended family. How did that happen? As if I wouldn't keep track. It's adorable. And then once in a while, a grandparent does actually pass away, and I feel bad because I have doubted them. But chances are, they're doing fine. They lie. So this is an essay called I Once Was Miss America, and then you'll soon find out that I'm obsessed with a certain kind of book. In 1984, Vanessa Williams became Miss America. She would later have to step down because of a nude photo scandal, but when she was first crowned, it was an amazing moment for black girls everywhere. Williams was the first black woman to wear the Miss America crown in the pageant's then 63-year history. I was not the kind of girl who cared much about pageants or being a beauty queen, but watching Williams and her perfect cheekbones and her glittering teeth as she accepted the crown gave girls like me ideas. That moment made us believe that we too could be beautiful. While Vanessa Williams offered black girls a new image of who the All-American girl could be, the more traditional image of the All-American girl could be found in Sweet Valley, an idyllic town in sunny Southern California where the lawns are perfectly manicured. Everyone is fit and beautiful and successful. As is the case in most perfect places, life in Sweet Valley is episodic. There is a narrative arc to each day or week or month, always a valuable lesson to be learned. The endings in Sweet Valley are mostly happy, the meek inherit, all good things come to those who wait. There is nowhere in the world like Sweet Valley. Elizabeth and Jessica Wakefield are the sweethearts of Sweet Valley. They are blonde and thin and perfect, even with all of their human flaws. The Wakefield sisters are twins, so really we're talking about twice the perfection. Jessica is a bad, bad girl, even though in Sweet Valley, a bad girl is never quite that bad. The sisters wear matching lavalier necklaces and they drive a red Fiat. Elizabeth and Jessica love each other and they're best friends, but they're also rivals. Sisters are complicated, even when they're perfect. The Wakefield twins, of course, are not real. They are the main characters of the Sweet Valley High series. I started reading the Sweet Valley High books when I was 8 or 9 years old. I was cross-eyed and I wore thick bifocals. Other than my younger brother, I was the only black kid in school, so I was going to be noticed even though I very much wanted to go unnoticed. I was shy and awkward and I had no idea how to fix myself. My hair was wild, it stood on end, and it earned me inexplicable nicknames like hair, beard, and mustache, even though I had neither a beard nor a mustache. My classmates also called me Don King, but I looked nothing like Don King. He's a man for one. I was told my parents talked funny, which I later realized was a reference to their thick Haitian accents, which I did not hear until they were pointed out to me, and then suddenly those accents were all I heard. I read books while I walked to school. I had the strangest laugh and a bit of a bucktooth situation. I regularly wore overalls by choice. So this should give you a sense of where I was on the social ladder. I was kind of reaching up for the bottom rung. When I first started reading Sweet Valley High books, I wanted girls like the Wakefield twins to love me. I wanted the handsome boys who chased girls like those Wakefield twins to love me. I wanted the popular kids to pull me into the shelter of their golden embrace and make me popular too, because I knew that popularity was contagious. There was one particular group of golden, popular kids at my school. They're in every school, an interchangeable infestation of good genes and big smiles and perfect hair. I don't remember much about grade school, but I do remember the first and last names of all of the popular kids. I watched them all the time, trying to figure out how to breathe the air in their atmosphere. They were so American and therefore exotic because they had freedoms that I did not. I was a different kind of American. I had conservative Haitian parents who wanted the best for their kids, but who were also very wary of American permissiveness. I was American at school and Haitian at home. This required negotiating a fine balance, and I am a very clumsy person. In truth, there is nothing more desperate and unrequited than the love of an unpopular girl for the cool kids. One day, the kids in the popular clique were teasing me about what I have no idea. I do not remember, but I got angrier and angrier as they taunted me, not only because they were teasing me, but also because I was so painfully aware of the gaping distance between where we were and where I wanted us to be. That day, though, I needed to come up with a snappy retort to show them that they could not push me around, to show them that I was cool too, to stand my ground. I pointed my fingers at them like Miss Seeley laying a curse on Mr. in The Color Purple, and I shouted, "One day just you wait and see, I'm going to become Miss America." That was my mother's nickname for me, Miss America. I'm her firstborn child in these United States. I loved my nickname. Those popular kids laughed and laughed. For the rest of that year and into the next, they teased me mercilessly about Miss America, asking me how my campaign was going, making comments about sashes and crowns, prancing around in front of me doing that Miss America wave. They incorporated props. Basically, they made it crystal clear that I didn't have a shot in the hell at the crown, but I'm stubborn, and Vanessa Williams had won Miss America, so I began to sincerely believe that I too was going to become Miss America. I reminded my classmates of my belief regularly, which only fueled their petty torments. In truth, I have no idea where I was going with this strategy. The Sweet Valley High books were extremely popular when I was young, and most girls immediately identified as an Elizabeth or a Jessica. Most of the people who knew me would assume that I was an Elizabeth minus her popularity, but I wasn't. In my head, I was Jessica, a girl who was confident and sexy and smart, a girl everyone wanted to be around. I was the future Miss America, ordained by my mother and Vanessa Williams. I always knew, of course, that there was something unnatural about Sweet Valley, but I didn't care. I still don't. I was well aware that not everyone lives in a perfect suburb with perfect parents leading perfect lives. I had been to Haiti, seen incomprehensible poverty with my own eyes. So I knew my relatively good fortune was an accident of birth. I knew there is rarely such a thing as a happy ending. I understood that the Sweet Valley High books espouse an unrealistic, narrow ideal of beauty, and that any town where everyone looks and acts the same is not to be trusted. Like many writers, I lived inside of books as a child. Inside books, I could get away from the impossible things that I had to deal with. When I read, I was never lonely or tormented or scared. I read everything I could get my hands on, and my parents indulged and encouraged me. They were strict about things like TV and grades, but they never censored my reading or questioned my love of Sweet Valley. We moved around a lot for my father's job, but Sweet Valley never moved, and the people never changed. The kids in Sweet Valley were a constant, and in a small way, they were my friends. Thank you. And so the title essay of this book was me grappling with feminism, because for a long time I didn't openly claim feminism, especially in my 20s. I was just like, oh, no, I'm not a feminist, I give blowjobs. I don't know. Your 20s can be really rough. And I had really strange ideas. And so I wrote an essay to start to think through what feminism meant to me and how I could understand my role as a feminist as I got older. And so I split the essay into two parts, and I'm going to read from the second part of Bad Feminist. I am failing as a woman. I am failing as a feminist. To freely accept the feminist label would not be fair to good feminists. If I am indeed a feminist, I am a rather bad one. I'm a mess of contradictions. There are many ways in which I'm simply doing feminism wrong, at least according to the way my perceptions of feminism have been warped by being a woman in this world. I want to be independent, but I want to be taken care of and have someone to come home to. I have a job I'm pretty good at. I'm in charge of things. I'm on committees. People respect me and take my advice. I want to be strong and professional, but I resent how hard I have to work to be taken seriously, to receive a fraction of the consideration I might otherwise receive. Sometimes I feel an overwhelming need to cry at work, so I close my office door and just lose it. I want to be in charge and respected and in control, but I want to surrender completely in other aspects of my life. I mean, who wants to grow up? When I drive to work, I listen to thuggish rap at a very loud volume, even though the lyrics are degrading to women, and frankly, they offend me to my core. But the classic Yin Yang Twins song, Salt Shaker, it's amazing. You gotta shake it till your camel starts to hurt? Come on, that's poetry. Of course I'm mortified by my music choices. I care what people think. Pink is my favorite color. I used to say my favorite color was black to be cool, but it's pink, all shades of pink. If I have an accessory, it is probably pink. I read Vogue, and I'm not doing it ironically, though it might seem that way. I once live tweeted the September issue. I demonstrate little outward evidence of this, but I have a very indulgent fantasy where I have a closet full of pretty shoes and pretty clothes and purses, and they all match. I love dresses. For years, I pretended I hated them, but I don't. Maxi dresses are one of the finest clothing items to become popular in recent years. I have opinions on maxi dresses. I shave my legs. Again, this mortifies me. If I take issues with unrealistic standards of beauty that women are held to, shouldn't I have no fondness for fashion and smooth calves? I know nothing about cars. When I take my car to the mechanic, they're speaking a foreign language. A mechanic asks, "What's wrong with my car?" And I stutter things like, "Well, there's a sound," and I try to drown it out with the radio. Right now, the windshield wiper fluid from my car in the rear just sort of sprays the window. It voids the window, rather. It sprays into the air, and I don't know how to deal with this. It feels like a very expensive problem. I still call my dad with questions about cars, and I'm not at all interested in changing any of my car-related ignorance. I do not want to be good at cars. Good feminists, I assume, are independent enough to address vehicular crises on their own, and they're independent enough to care. Despite what people think based on my writing, I do like men. They're interesting to me, and I mostly wish that they would be better about how they treat women, so I wouldn't have to call them out so often. And still, I put up with nonsense from unsuitable men, even though I know better and I can do better. Sometimes, a lot of the time, honestly, I totally fake it because it's easier. I'm a fan of orgasms, but they take time, and in many instances, I don't want to invest that time. All too often, I just don't really like the guy enough to explain the calculus of my desire, and then I feel guilty because the sisterhood would not approve. I'm not even sure what the sisterhood is, but the idea of a sisterhood menaces me, quietly reminding me of how bad a feminist I am. Good feminists do not fear the sisterhood because they know that they are comporting themselves in sisterhood-approved ways. Because I have so many deeply held opinions about gender equality, I feel a lot of pressure to live up to certain ideals. I'm supposed to be a good feminist who is having it all, doing it all, but really, I'm a woman in her early 40s struggling to accept herself and her credit score. For so long, I told myself I was not this woman, utterly human and flawed. I said I was anything but this woman, and then it was exhausting and unsustainable and even harder than simply embracing who I am. Maybe I'm a bad feminist, but I am deeply committed to the issues that are important to feminism. I have strong opinions about misogyny, institutional sexism that consistently places women at a disadvantage, the inequity in pay, the cult of beauty and thinness, the repeated attacks on reproductive freedom, violence against women, and on the list goes. I am as committed to fighting fiercely for equality as I am committed to disrupting the notion that there is an essential feminism or one true feminism to rule them all. At some point, I got it into my head that a feminist was a certain kind of woman. I bought into grossly inaccurate myths about who feminists are: militant, perfect in their politics in person, man-hating, humorless. I bought into these myths even though I know better, and intellectually, I've always known better. I'm not proud of this, and I don't want to buy into these myths anymore. I don't want to disavow feminism like far too many other women have been. Bad feminism seems like the only way I can both embrace myself as a feminist and be myself. And so no matter what issues I might have with feminism, I am a feminist. I cannot and will not deny the importance and absolute necessity of feminism. Like most people, I'm full of contradictions, but I also don't want to be treated badly simply because I'm a woman. I am a bad feminist, but I would rather be a bad feminist than to be no feminist at all. Thank you. And so I love to do Q&A because I find that it can be more interesting than just me blah, blah, blah at you. And so I would love to take questions from the audience about anything. I can also talk about my boyfriend, Channing Tatum. Or my wife, Beyonce. Well, who I'm going to meet at Red Lobster later. That's for people who listen to music. I know, yeah. Any questions? Don't all ask at once. I will just start calling on you. Yes. Oh, great.
Who inspires you as a writer?
Oh, as a writer, really, there are a lot of inspirations. My favorite writer is Edith Wharton, so I get a lot from her and just her wit and intelligence. Zadie Smith, in terms of contemporary writers, because she's just always willing to take chances, and she just doesn't care. And she also just has an audacious mind. The way she works through big questions in her essays and the way she tackles our human lives in her fiction are endlessly inspiring to me. Yeah.
Let me come over to this way, and then you all can share the mic.
I just like to say that your tweets about Marco Rubio have been entertaining over the past couple of weeks. So I would just like
me
to
and Marco.
I just like to ask what your thoughts are about him.
You know, I think that Marco Rubio is a hateful, odious little man. He reminds me of Tracy Flick from Election, right? Think about it. He just tries so hard, and he's so tiny and so angry. And so it's super appealing to me. And so I do objectify Marco Rubio. And I also just want to teach him some manners because he's so homophobic and he's just a bad man. But he just gets so righteous. Like, I know that he's going to get on stage for the debate, the 50,000th debate tonight. And his huge ears are going to be there. And he's going to just say, and I'll tell you what, Hillary Clinton. And he just loves getting in there like that. And so, yeah, I think he's hateful, but that's what really excites me about it. And I have no small amount of shame over how lustful I am for him. Because, I mean, literally, I could put him in my pocket. He's so little. And when he wore those little boots, I was just like, Marco, stop. You are such a tease. And he's just in complete denial. And the best part about his run for presidency is that he never shows up for work in the Senate. Even before he started running, he never shows up. He hates the Senate. He talks about it. And then he's like, yeah, but I'm going to run for office anyway. Hubris. That's amazing. So anyway, that's a lot on Marco Rubio.
What inspired you to become the person that you are today? I mean, you're sitting up there and you're obviously awesome.
Wow.
But I just want to know, what road did you travel on to get where you are?
That's a good question. I have Haitian parents. And with Haitian parents, there is no failure. I'm the oldest. And I guess I'm a reasonably successful writer. No, I'm pretty successful. My brother, who's 3 years younger than me, is a CEO, and he's the youngest black CEO and one of 12 for a Fortune 500 company. And my baby brother is an engineer. My parents worked very hard. And so that's what put me on the path. My mom said that to raise black children in America, you have to be relentless with love. And she was relentless with love, and they still are. They're my biggest fans and supporters, and they always made sure that we stayed in school, and when we got home, they gave us homework. Not from school. They invented their own homework for us. And that's really what set me on the path and that's where my ambition started, certainly. And then I also happen to love reading and writing, and my ambition just continued to grow. The more people tell me you can't do something, the more I'm like, I'll show you. And so, like, when they say you can't teach, I will get a PhD. And I literally, that's how it works. That's how I got my PhD. Don't dare me. because I have nothing but time. And so, so it's really just my parents that set me on the right path, and then ferocious ambition.
You mentioned having fear of public speaking. Do you still have that fear? Because I don't see it.
I do. I'm very shy and quiet in my natural life. And so I just accept that I have worked very hard, and that if people are going to give me the benefit of their time, I'm going to do my best to reward that and to recognize that I deserve to be here. And that helps me overcome a lot of my anxiety. And sometimes I do just throw up before an event and just get it all out. And that helps too. So it's a great weight loss plan if you're looking for tips.
Dr. Gay, I'm going to walk over this way, but if you shared about Marco, you've got to tell us how you think about Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is a travesty. You know, the thing is that Donald Trump, in some ways, is not as dangerous as the rest of the GOP field, because no matter what nonsense he's talking on the campaign trail, he's a social liberal. He really is. And once he gets in office, he's not going to do a goddamn thing about reproductive freedom or LGBT rights. He's going to let that stand. But he's racist and xenophobic, and he wants to ban Muslims from entering the country. This is not a person who can be allowed to run the country. We can't say, like, some of us are going to be okay so we can tolerate him. And I think it's so dangerous and cynical what he's doing, because I don't think, like, in his heart of hearts that he's truly racist. I think he's ambitious, and he knows that racism is what's going to get him into the White House. And so he's willing to use racism. I prefer an actual racist. If you're going to be racist, like, be genuine about it. Earn it by joining the Klan. He's not earning it, he's using it. And he is fomenting harassment against Muslim people. And I think it's putting a lot of people's lives in danger and a lot of people's emotional health in danger. And so I think that we need to do everything possible, no matter what your political affiliation is, to stop this man from taking office. I read an essay on Salon today from a white woman, no offense. There's no shame in that, but she said she's not going to vote in November. And that's insane. That's insane, because she has nothing to lose, and she doesn't really care for either Bernie or Hillary. She's not going to vote. That doesn't make any sense. The costs are too high to just do nothing with your vote. Write in Jill Stein. I mean, do something, but just vote. So Jill Stein is great. I love Jill Stein. In a perfect world, she would be my candidate, but we don't live in a perfect world, so I'm a Hillary girl.
Earlier you said you were American at home, or Haitian at home and American at school.
Yes.
How did you handle that back then, and how do you handle that now?
Now I embrace it. Now I'm actually Haitian American everywhere I go. And I identify both as Haitian American and Black American because I was born here. When I was a kid, it was difficult. I didn't understand why we weren't allowed to do the things that our friends were allowed to do, like this thing called sleepovers. Haitian parents don't do that. You want us to send you where? Oh no, Roxane. And so that was difficult. But at the same time, I grew up with a confidence I think that I would not have had otherwise, because I was so loved and because we would go back to Haiti in the summers. And so we lived in Nebraska. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, which is predominantly white. And then I would go to Port-au-Prince in the summers, and everyone was Black, all shades of Black. And it was so great to know that there was a place in the world where I belonged. And so I held on to that growing up. And, you know, of course, I had my sulky moments, like, why do we eat weird food? And, you know, the stuff, when, you know, the children of immigrant parents, like we are just ingrates. But now I'm very grateful, and I'm so happy to be both Haitian and American, and I have no problem holding those identities simultaneously. Other questions? Oh, one of the Dearborn people.
Yes.
Way to drive.
So in your Bad Feminist essay, you mentioned the kind of feminist that people have like idealized in their brain, like that humorless, that woman. And we were just talking about this the other day, how like a lot of those female leads in television shows are that woman. And so what do you think about that as like an example? Like, is that a good thing to have just strong female leads just to have them? Or is it bad because they project that stereotype?
No, I think it's great to have strong female leads. I think anytime you have a strong woman being portrayed in popular culture, something important is happening. I think that the people who have something to lose if women are considered equal are the ones who develop this caricature of the feminist as man-hating and angry and humorless. And we have to recognize where that caricature comes from and why it's put forward. Because they don't, I mean, would you want to lose the exquisite privilege of being a white man? I mean, come on. They're not going to let go of that easily. And why should they? I mean, nobody's going to be like, oh, you know what, let's share. I wish, but we don't live in that world. And so, I think that when we see strong women on television, I think we can get better and broader in those portrayals, because all too often those women are one thing. And they're not allowed to be human. And so we need to humanize those portrayals, but I don't think we have to overcorrect either. Yes, over there.
So how do you find the market for publishing as a woman in America?
Publishing as a woman? Personally, I've had no issues. Personally, it's been great. I've been very lucky. I think you have to work very, very hard, and then you also have to be very lucky and be in the right time at the right place and be able to respond to that moment of luck. I think that different kinds of women have real struggles, and it's hard to watch, and to know that this industry that's supposed to be predicated on the joy of literature is so hell-bent on marginalizing women. I think that when you reach a certain level of success, you get to push back against people trying to pigeonhole you as a woman writer, or a black writer, or a Haitian writer, or a queer writer. And so I've been lucky in that I've been able to push back and write what I want, when I want. But the reality is that that's the exception and not the rule, and so I'm very mindful of that. Publishing as a black woman, though, sucks. It's a very white industry. I have never had a black editor, or an editor of any race or ethnicity other than white. And the challenge becomes that they oftentimes don't know what they're editing. They don't have the cultural awareness to edit writers of color properly. And that can be quite an obstacle. Oftentimes in the marketing departments, they'll say, we just don't know how to market books from people of color, as if we're aliens. Like, it's called reading. So market to them and to us like we're humans. And so that is really, really frustrating, but I have made it, sometimes to my detriment, my mission to make sure that publishing talks about diversity. And I have no problem letting them know that they are trash and they need to get better. So it's hard, but I think change is coming. And we've seen a lot of, at least, acknowledgement of the problem. And now we need to do something more. Now we need to stop talking about it and pointing out the statistics. And we need to start addressing the pipeline issue in terms of editorial issues. Because black writers exist, Asian writers, Latino writers, Middle Eastern writers. There's no shortage of writers of color. It's a question of editors recognizing the merits of that work and recognizing that that work can have a broad-based appeal.
As the next question comes, just raise your hand. I want to ask a lot of students in the room, Dr. Gay, and what would you say or 2 or 3 rudiments of student success and being a successful student. You know, inspire students and talk about what they need to do to make it in this time period.
Oh gosh, you know, it's tough. There are no easy answers to that question. But one, you have to, you have to work. You really do. You have to study, even though it sucks. You have to go to class, even though, you have to be present in your college education. You can't just say, I'm here because my parents want me to be here. If that's why you're here, quit college. Come back when you're ready. I think that you also have to recognize that there is life beyond the classroom. And so you need to live while you're in college and have fun and allow yourself to do that. Just, it's a question of finding the right balance between fun and extracurriculars and making sure that you're hitting the books. And I think you have to understand that you can make any major work for you as long as you know how to articulate to future employers what your major is doing for you. Instead of saying, oh, I can't major in English because I'm gonna, you know, work at McDonald's. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think when you go to college, you want something more than to, you know, sit in front of a hot fryer. I mean, for those of us who've been there, it sucks. You don't want to do it forever. And so I think you have to find ways to know what the value of your degree is, and not enough students do. They just sort of surrender to this rhetoric that you can't major in anything but business, and that's not the case. And frankly, I think more educators need to do more to help equip our students with an understanding of what their degrees are. It's really about critical thinking when you enter the workplace. Doesn't matter what your degree is. My brother, who's a CEO, has an English degree. And he went on, of course, to get his MBA, but he has an English degree. And so anything is possible, so long as you know how to market yourself. And so I think those are really important things for college students to remember. And just enjoy yourself once in a while. It's fun, learning.
Last year, Raven Simone was on Oprah, and I think everyone knows about this, where she said she didn't like being labeled or categorized or put into a category with a label.
Who?
What are Raven Simone?
Ray who?
Raven.
Oh, Ray. Oh, girl. Yes.
So, what are your thoughts on labels and identifying yourself with labels, and people who choose not to do that and people who do?
Mm-hmm. I think it's an individual choice. You know, when I was like 21, I was like, oh, don't label me. I'm Roxane. But I think that labels also offer a sense of belonging and a sense of identity. And I think for many of us, that's important. I like labels. I don't like to be contained by my label. I don't want someone to think that my labels are the entirety of who I am, but I do find them useful. And I also find that for the people who are younger, to see people identify like as bisexual, as Haitian American, as this, as that, it's useful to know that there are others like you. The danger is, especially for someone, well, Raven's just so Raven. Sorry, I make myself laugh. I think Raven is touched. I think she's just special. She's just, I don't know, all God's children, we must love them, but Raven is crazy. And I think that she's willfully provocative. And I respect her choice to not want to be labeled, but I sometimes wonder if people with her stature reject labels because they want to be accepted by the mainstream. So she wants to be on The View, so she's going to reject the label of lesbian, even though she's lesbian. And I get that. That's that's ambition, but call it what it is. Don't call it some sort of like stand on identity. It's ambition. It's career safety. Okay. So I just struggle with that, and that's not nice. You know, I'm working. I'm human. I'm a work in progress. But Raven drives me crazy. Not even on that label thing. Raven is just, she is so self-loathing and just the things she says about black people are crazy. I'm like, you are like half a step away from Stacey Dash. You need to just get it together. So I struggle with her, but thanks for asking. Now we can talk about Stacey Dash. She was so good in Clueless. Oh, what happened? Just Hollywood, man. It's terrible.
We talked about the other side. Oh, here we go. All right.
So I've been doing some research recently on rape culture and came across something about the quote-unquote good girl and bad girl. And I was also reading your book today, and the Sweet Valley High thing just really kind of stuck out to me. The, you know, good girl Jessica, or the good girl Elizabeth and the bad girl Jessica, you know, and I was wondering if you would still, like, how you felt about that now, after all these years, after reading them, or how it affects culture, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think on Sweet Valley High, they positioned Jessica and Elizabeth as light and dark, good and evil, but in a tolerable package. So I accept it for what it is. Sort of like the popular girl who's bookish and quiet, and then the popular girl who's a good girl, but, you know, probably kisses boys on the first date. Now that I'm older, I recognize that the way Jessica is portrayed is so messed up, and it sends such a bad message, because all she ever did was make out. Like, who cares? It's nothing. And so it's a shame, but I understand the books as a product of their time. And what I get more frustrated at are pop culture artifacts today that are being produced that perpetuate that same message. That was back in 1980, 1986, 1987. I get it. We were not ready for thinking about rape culture at that time. But we're ready now, and we know what rape culture is now. And we have to stop perpetuating this message. And we see it on sitcoms, we see it on Lifetime movies. The good girl is the one who escapes trouble, and the bad girl is the one who runs into the bad boy and gets more than she bargained for. And we really have to challenge that narrative and do something better to let young women and young men know that there's no such thing as asking for it, and that there's no one type of person who is vulnerable to sexual assault. So we have a lot of work to do. Yeah, oh no, I get that. I didn't feel judged at all. I'm very comfortable with my love of Sweet Valley. It's just, they're so bad. Like, you can read a book in like 20 minutes. It is a tic-tac of nutrition. But also satisfying, like everything is always resolved. There was one book where their brother, the twins' brother Stephen, dated the black girl, Nora, I think her name was Nora, and she was there for one book. And they decided that it was too hard on their families, and so they broke up. That's where they were in terms of interracial dating in the 80s. Publishing, ladies and gentlemen. And also a bit of trivia. Francine Pascal, whose name is on all of the Sweet Valley High books, didn't write a single one. She just came up with the idea. So get you a good idea. All right, any last questions?
I'm just curious. I thought it was funny. We talked a little bit about some people either, I wouldn't say you despise, but you would provide advice to maybe. But like, who are some of those voices for empowerment, for feminism that are worth hearing? Like, I'm just curious if like activists or writers, anyone other than yourself, of course. But.
Yeah, of course. No, it's a great question. There's this magazine, a new online magazine called The Establishment, and it's run by many women, but Ijeoma Aluma is one of the key figures who started the magazine. And I think that they are providing a really great home for feminist activists and thinkers. And I love seeing what they come up with. There's a great writer named Sarita McFadden, who I think is doing some really smart work, and she talks a lot about photography and race, which I think is so interesting. And until I started reading her work, I didn't realize, oh, this is an actual thing. Stacia Brown does a lot of interesting work that I admire. Anna Holmes, who works for Fusion, but also is a columnist for the New York Times Book Review. She has a really smart take on a lot of different things that I admire. I disagree with almost everything she has to say, but Parker Malloy is a really great transgender activist who I think is whip smart and also writes some really interesting things. The internet has been a very democratizing thing, especially in the past 4 or 5 years. And so there are a lot of really great people out there.
All right, I just want to ask one parting question. And this person is trying to hit a lot of intersectionality in what this public speech and discourse. You talked about Republicans. Any thoughts about Hillary and what if she's able to be the first woman president, what that would mean in the context of feminism and even further beyond?
Yeah, Hillary is, I think she's a great candidate there. I said it. I am a big fan of Hillary Clinton. I think she works hard. I think she has always worked hard. I think she has made mistakes and said terrible things. But I would prefer a candidate who changes than a candidate who has been saying the exact same thing without any sort of effect for the past 30 years. I think it would be so important for her to win. And I think that we can see just how pervasive sexism is in terms of the challenges that she's facing as she goes into office. Bernie Sanders is an interesting character, an interesting thinker, an interesting politician. I don't care for him, but I think that he is right that we need to overhaul campaign finance and our entire financial system as a country. And I just wish that he understood that we have to think beyond economics, that race and gender and sexuality and identities of all kinds affect our economic standing. So we have to go just beyond the economic factor. I think Hillary Clinton understands that. I think she is a career politician, and I understand why that gives a lot of people pause. It gives me pause. It should give all of us pause. But let's not pretend that Sanders hasn't been in the Senate for like 3 decades. If that's not a career politician, then I don't know what is. I find it frustrating that Hillary is oftentimes held responsible for things that her husband did. I'm trying to remember the name of the act, but there was an act that both Sanders voted for and Bill Clinton passed, and people were holding Hillary Clinton responsible. And I was just like, are you serious? Do you hear yourselves? And so I think it would mean so much to so many for her to be the first woman president. However, I also think that she should be the next president, regardless of gender. Like, she's the one I would choose of any viable Democrat out there. And Elizabeth Warren would be a close second. And Jill Stein would be third. And Al Gore would be fourth. And somewhere later, I would rank Bernie Sanders. Just because I think you have to have a broader appeal. And I also think in terms of foreign affairs, Hillary Clinton knows she knows what she's doing. She was Secretary of State. And that's not enough for some people is amazing. And I also think that it's okay to question her, and we should interrogate her because her vote on the Iraq War is a problem. But is it a problem such that I would not like to see her win the presidency? No. But that's, I think, a very privileged stance to have as well, because I wasn't in a war-torn country where 100,000 people were murdered. So these are, you know, I struggle. I struggle because I do like her. I think she's interesting. I think she's smart. I think that she's lethal. She knows where the bodies are buried, and so she knows all kinds of Washington secrets. And so I think she's going to get things done. And I look at Bernie Sanders, and I just wonder, okay, so we're going to have this revolution, and college is going to be free. I teach at a state university where our funding is being slashed in the liberal arts to the point where programs are being decimated. And I'm just like, so, and this is with people paying tuition. So where does the free part come in? And I wonder how he's going to work with other politicians, because revolution does not exist in a vacuum. You have to get other politicians, the way our current country is currently set up, running with him. And so I feel like Hillary Clinton will be more effective in the long run. And that, I know that makes me more of a realist than an idealist, but I'm okay with that.
Come on and join me and give a hand to Dr. Roxane Gay.
Thank you.
Dr. Gay, if you'll allow me, I need to thank three groups: the Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs, provided refreshments and put the infrastructure together. Come on and stand up, ODMA. We want to thank you. I want to again thank our students from the University of Michigan at Dearborn for traveling down here. Kaylin, where are you? Kaylin, we're thankful. Our students from Women's Studies, are you? Come on, stand up and let us see you tonight and wave to us.
They're right here at this table.
I know it, and they're hiding. Come on, wave your hands. We're very, very proud of you. We are very proud of you. And thank you for your contributions and for bringing enlightenment. And I could not leave this stage without thanking one of our primary members of our Diversity Council, Dr. Quentin Dixie. He was actually the brain trust and the connection. He, along with Dr. Badia, have made this happen. Quentin, we thank you for your contribution as well. And I think you're okay if folks want to come up and shake your hands. I think some folk may have some books that you've written.
I'll sign them up front.
And she will sign them right out front this door here. Thank you so much, and have a safe journey home.